Welcome back to Deed Talks, where family loyalty can hide the deepest betrayals. Tonight's story is called My Parents Gave My Inheritance to My Brother, Then Begged Me to Save the Family Business. For 12 years, I believed working without a real salary was the price of protecting everything my parents had built. I never imagined they had already decided it would all belong to someone else. Claire, where are the Hawthorne shipment numbers? My father's voice carried across the conference room before I had fully set down my coffee. I opened the folder in front of me. The original supplier delayed production again. I moved half the order to our backup manufacturer in Ohio and negotiated priority shipping. We should still meet the customer's deadline. My father leaned back in his chair. And the extra cost? Covered by the penalty credit from the first supplier, Martin. Our accountant gave me a small nod from the other end of the table. The conference room door opened 12 minutes late, and my younger brother, Ryan, walked in wearing sunglasses on top of his head. Sorry, he said, dropping into the empty chair beside our father. Traffic was terrible. Ryan lived 7 minutes from the office. My father slid the sales report toward him. Good. You're here. We were discussing the Hawthorne problem. Ryan glanced at the page, then at me. We should probably find another supplier. I already did, I said. He tapped the report as though he had not heard me. That's what I'm saying. We can't keep depending on companies that let us down. My father smiled. That's the kind of thinking we need, he said, taking charge before a problem gets worse. For a moment, nobody spoke. I looked at Martin. His eyes dropped to his notes. The familiar pressure settled behind my ribs, but I ignored it. I had become good at ignoring things. Bennett Home Furnishings had been my parents' business since before Ryan and I were born. When my mother needed surgery 12 years earlier, I left a logistics job in Chicago to help temporarily. Temporary became permanent after my father promised that Ryan and I would eventually inherit the company equally. I handled suppliers, payroll emergencies, customer complaints, staff schedules, insurance renewals, and nearly every crisis Ryan described as management stuff. Ryan had a title. I had responsibilities. When the meeting ended, my father asked everyone except me to leave. He closed the door and folded his hands over the table. You handled Hawthorne well, he said. Thank you. I knew I could rely on you. Those words once made me proud. That morning, they felt strangely heavy. He pulled a cream-colored envelope from beneath his notebook. The return address belonged to our family attorney. Your mother and I have scheduled a meeting for Friday, he said. We're reviewing some long-term plans. What kind of plans? Nothing you need to worry about. I stared at the envelope. Is Ryan going? My father hesitated for less than a second. Yes. And me? He placed the envelope back beneath his notebook. We'll bring you in when we need you. Claire. I stood outside the conference room for several seconds after my father dismissed me. Through the glass wall, I could see him gathering papers into a neat stack. The cream-colored envelope disappeared into his briefcase. When I returned to my office, Ryan was leaning against my desk, scrolling through his phone. Dad said there's some attorney meeting Friday, I said. He looked up too quickly. Did he? You already knew. Ryan slipped his phone into his pocket. They mentioned something. Estate planning, I think. And they invited you. He shrugged. I'm the one with a wife and 2 kids. Maybe they want to make sure everyone's protected. The words were casual, but they stayed with me, everyone. Apparently, that did not automatically include me. Before I could answer, my phone rang. It was my mother. Can you stop by tonight? She asked. Your father forgot his medication again, and the kitchen faucet is leaking. I'll come after work. Thank you, sweetheart. I don't know what we'd do without you. I almost laughed. At 6:30, I was still at the office correcting purchase orders Ryan had approved without checking the delivery dates. By the time I reached my parents' house, my mother was sitting at the kitchen table with a heating pad behind her back. The faucet was dripping steadily into a bowl. You look exhausted, she said. I'm fine. That was the answer I had given for years. I replaced a worn washer beneath the sink, organized my father's weekly pills, and reheated soup for both of them. My father barely looked away from the television. Claire, my mother said, sit with me a minute. She opened the drawer beside her and removed an old photograph. It showed my parents standing in front of the first Bennett Home Furnishings store. My father was younger and thinner, one arm around my mother. She was holding toddler Ryan on her hip. I stood beside them in a red coat, smiling at the camera. "You remember this?" she asked. "Not really. You insisted on carrying the ribbon for the opening ceremony. You were so serious about it." She touched the edge of the photograph. "You've always cared about the business." I looked toward my father. "Sometimes I think I care about it more than anyone else." He muted the television. "That's not fair," he said. "I left Chicago to help for 6 months. It's been 12 years. We needed you," my mother said softly. "I know, and you'll be rewarded," my father added. "Your mother and I have always said the company would stay in the family." I waited for him to say equally. He did not. My mother reached across the table and placed her hand over mine. "None of this would still be here without you." For a moment, I believed her. Then my father cleared his throat. "Ryan will need full access to the company accounts starting tomorrow. Make sure he has every password." I pulled my hand away from my mother's. "Why?" My father turned the television sound back on. "Because it's time he started learning what he'll be responsible for." The next morning, Ryan was already in my office when I arrived. He sat behind my desk with my laptop open and a yellow legal pad beside him. "What are you doing?" I asked. "Dad told me to get familiar with the accounts. That does not mean you use my computer." He leaned back. "You're always saying the company needs better organization." "I'm trying to learn." I set my bag down and reached for the laptop. Ryan placed one hand on the keyboard. "Why are half the supplier agreements under your login?" "Because I negotiated them." "And why do you approve every payment over $10,000? "Because Dad gave me that responsibility after you paid the same invoice twice 3 years ago." His expression tightened. "That was one mistake. It cost us $19,000. We recovered most of it." I recovered it. Ryan stood so quickly that the chair rolled into the filing cabinet. "This is exactly the problem," he said. "You act like nobody can do anything without you." I lowered my voice. "I never said that." "You don't have to." He walked out, leaving my laptop unlocked. At noon, my father called me into his office. Ryan was already there, sitting beside him. "Your brother says you're making this transition difficult," my father said. "What transition?" He frowned. "Don't be dramatic. I'm asking a simple question." Ryan crossed his arms. "I need access if I'm going to take on more responsibility." "Access to what?" "Everything." I looked at my father. "Everything?" He avoided my eyes and opened a blue folder. For 12 years, I had learned to recognize his silences. Some meant he was tired. Some meant he was angry. This one meant a decision had already been made. He turned the folder toward me. At the top of the first page were the words Executive Succession Framework. Ryan Bennett was listed as incoming president. My name appeared near the bottom. Claire Bennett, Transitional Advisor. I read the line twice. "What is this?" "A draft," my father said. "A draft you forgot to show me?" "It isn't final." "Then why does Ryan already have a title?" My father pressed his lips together. "Your brother needs confidence." "And I don't." "That's not what I said." Ryan tapped the page. "You'll still be involved. Nobody is pushing you out. As an advisor, you're good at supporting operations." I looked at him. The company's largest supplier contract existed because of me. I had kept 32 employees paid during a cash shortage. I had spent Christmas Eve in the warehouse after a pipe burst over $40,000 worth of inventory. Ryan had attended 3 management meetings that year. My father closed the folder. "Claire, you have always been more independent. Ryan needs a clear path." I heard my mother's voice from the night before. "None of this would still be here without you." I had mistaken gratitude for security. "When is the attorney meeting?" I asked. "Friday." "And what exactly are you reviewing?" My father looked at Ryan before answering. "Our estate plan." The room went still. "Am I invited?" "You'll be told what concerns you afterward." That was the moment I understood the meeting was not being held to discuss my future. It was being held to decide it without me. Friday afternoon, I received a text from my mother. "Come to Mr. Holloway's office at 4. Your father thinks you should hear this with us." I read it 3 times. For most of the week, I had been excluded from the meeting. Now, less than 2 hours before it began, I was suddenly expected to attend. Mr. Holloway's office was on the second floor of a brick building downtown. My parents were already seated when I arrived. Ryan sat beside our father, wearing the navy suit he usually saved for weddings and funerals. There was one empty chair near the door. I took it. Mr. Holloway gave me a polite smile. "Claire, thank you for coming. I didn't know I was invited until this afternoon." My mother shifted in her seat. "We thought it would be easier this way." "Easier for whom?" My father sighed. "Please don't start, Mr. Holloway opened a thick folder. "As your parents requested, we are reviewing the updated estate plan and business succession documents." Updated. That single word told me there had been an earlier version. He began with the house. It would pass to Ryan. The family investment account would also pass to Ryan, with a smaller charitable gift made in my parents' names. Then he turned to Bennett Home Furnishings. Upon the death or incapacity of both owners, controlling interest in the company will transfer to Ryan Bennett. I felt my fingers tighten around the strap of my handbag. "What percentage?" I asked. Mr. Holloway glanced at my father. 100%. The room seemed to shrink. "And me?" My mother reached for my hand, but I moved it into my lap. Mr. Holloway continued carefully. "You will receive your grandmother's jewelry and a trust valued at approximately $35,000. I stared at him. The company had recently been valued at more than $3 million. The house alone was worth nearly $700,000. Ryan looked down at the carpet. "You knew?" I asked him. He rubbed his thumb against his wedding ring. "They mentioned the general plan." "How long ago?" "Claire," my father said sharply, "this is our decision. I worked there for 12 years, and we appreciate that. I gave up my career." My mother's voice trembled. "You're capable. You've always been able to take care of yourself." I looked at Ryan. "And he hasn't. He has a wife and children," she said. "He needs stability. So because I made responsible choices, I get less." "That is not what this means," my father said. "What does it mean?" He leaned forward. "It means the company needs one owner. Ryan carries the Bennett name forward through his children. Dividing ownership could create conflict." I almost laughed. "You're avoiding conflict by giving everything to him?" Ryan finally looked at me. "I didn't ask them to do this, but you accepted." His silence was answer enough. Mr. Holloway pushed a tissue box toward me. I ignored it. My parents had not forgotten what I had sacrificed. They had counted on it. And as I looked at the documents spread across the table, one question became impossible to avoid. Had they ever planned to give me anything at all? No one followed me when I left Mr. Holloway's office. I sat in my car with both hands resting on the steering wheel, watching people cross the street carrying coffee cups and grocery bags as though it were an ordinary Friday. My phone rang twice. First my mother, then Ryan. I let both calls go to voicemail. By Monday morning, I had decided I would not pretend nothing had happened. I entered my father's office carrying a folder of my own. Inside were copies of old bank transfers, expense reports, and records of the years I had taken far less than the salary of an operations manager. My parents were already there. Ryan arrived a few minutes later and closed the door behind him. "I want to discuss my position," I said. My father leaned back. "I assumed you would. I have worked here for 12 years. For most of that time, I have been paid just enough to cover basic expenses. No retirement contributions, no ownership, no written agreement." My mother looked wounded. "We gave you a place to live when you came home. For 8 months. We helped with groceries. I was working 60-hour weeks." My father tapped one finger against his desk. "Get to the point, Claire." I opened the folder. "If the company is going entirely to Ryan, then I want to be compensated fairly for the work I have already done. I also want a formal salary and employment contract going forward." Ryan let out a quiet breath. "So now you want to bill mom and dad for being part of the family?" "I want to be paid for running a business. You never ran it alone." "I didn't say I did." My father picked up one of the documents and glanced at it. "You received income. I received $28,000 last year. You had no mortgage. I have my own apartment." My mother folded her hands tightly. "You're making this sound as though we exploited you." I looked at her. "What would you call it?" Her eyes filled. but she did not answer. My father dropped the paper onto the desk. We supported you when you left Chicago. We gave you security. We treated you as part of something larger than yourself. And I gave the company 12 years. Families do not keep score like this. Then why did you calculate exactly what Ryan needed and exactly how little I could survive without? The room went silent. Ryan stared at the window. My father's face hardened. You're being ungrateful. The word landed more painfully than I expected. I had missed vacations, postponed graduate school, lent the company money during a cash shortage, and spent years telling myself I was building something that would eventually belong partly to me. Now gratitude was being used to erase all of it. My mother reached across the desk. Please don't turn love into an invoice. I closed the folder. I didn't. You turned my work into a gift and gave it to Ryan, for the first time. My brother looked ashamed. Then he cleared his throat. It doesn't matter anyway, he said. The company can't afford what you're asking. I turned toward him. That's not true. Ryan's eyes moved to our father, and in that brief glance, I realized the inheritance documents were not the only numbers they had been discussing without me. The following Thursday, my mother appeared in my office carrying a printed guest list and a box of cream-colored invitations. We're having a family dinner Saturday, she said. Your father wants to make Ryan's new role official. I stared at the invitations. Official to whom? Family, senior employees, a few longtime clients. And you want me there? Of course. She placed the box on my desk. I also need you to coordinate the catering. The restaurant wants final numbers by tomorrow. And your father thinks the warehouse showroom would look nice if you moved the spring displays. I waited for her to hear herself. She did not. You want me to organize a celebration for Ryan receiving the company I helped build? Her smile faded. It isn't a celebration against you. Then what exactly are we celebrating? Continuity, she said quietly. I should have refused immediately instead. I looked at the guest list and saw employees who depended on the company for health insurance, rent, and school fees. If the event became disorganized, they would notice, suppliers would notice too. So I did what I had always done. I fixed everything. By Saturday evening, the showroom had been transformed. Tables stood between staged living room displays and framed photographs of the company's history line one wall. I had selected most of them. In several, I was visible in the background, holding inventory sheets, speaking with employees, carrying boxes. Ryan arrived after the caterers. That looks good, he said, adjusting his tie. Did you prepare your remarks? He tapped his jacket pocket. Dad helped. At dinner, my father stood and raised his glass. Bennett Home Furnishings began as one small store, he said. Tonight, we celebrate the next generation of leadership. People applauded. He called Ryan forward. My brother spoke about modernization, expansion, and the importance of family tradition. He thanked our parents for building the company and his wife for supporting his ambitions. Then he smiled at the employees. I'm ready to take what my father created and lead it into the future. My name was never mentioned. Across the room, Martin met my eyes and looked away. After the guests left, I carried untouched dessert trays toward the kitchen. My mother followed me. I'm sorry, she whispered. For what part? Ryan should have acknowledged you, but he didn't. He was nervous. I set the tray down. You always have an explanation for him. She gripped the edge of the counter. Your father and I can revise things later. If Ryan proves he isn't responsible, we'll make changes. That promise reached the exhausted part of me that still wanted to believe her. Do you mean that? Yes. For a few seconds, hope returned. Then I went into my father's office looking for the catering invoice. A document was lying beneath his desk calendar. Transfer of ownership agreement. At the bottom were my parents' signatures. The date beside them was 3 weeks earlier. The decision had been legally completed before the attorney meeting, before the dinner, and before my mother promised it could still change. I heard footsteps behind me. When I turned, my mother was standing in the doorway. She saw the document in my hand and stopped. This time, there was no explanation ready. My mother stayed in the doorway while I held the signed agreement. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Finally, she said, Your father thought it was better to complete everything before emotions complicated the process. I looked down at the date again. You mean before I found out? That isn't what I meant. It is exactly what you meant. She stepped into the office and closed the door behind her. Claire, please try to understand. Your father has been under enormous pressure. So have I. I know. No, you don't. My voice was quieter than I expected. That frightened me more than shouting would have. I placed the document on the desk. You told me tonight that the plan could still change. Her face tightened. We could revise it later. You signed away the entire company 3 weeks ago. Ownership documents can be amended. Then why didn't you tell me they were already signed? She looked toward the hallway, as if my father might appear and answer for her. We were afraid you would leave. The truth arrived without drama. I sat in my father's chair. You knew I might leave if I understood what you were doing. So you kept me working. We needed stability. You needed me. Yes, she whispered. The honesty should have helped. Instead, it made every excuse worse. I left without saying goodbye. That night, I could not sleep. At 2 a.m, I opened my laptop and searched through old calendars and archived emails. At first, I told myself I only wanted to understand the timeline. Then I began counting. 12 years of supplier negotiations. 9 holiday seasons when I canceled personal plans. 3 company loans I helped refinance. 1 emergency transfer of $18,000 from my savings when payroll was short. I found the email where my father promised to repay me once things settled. There was no repayment record. I found a Christmas Eve message from Ryan asking whether I could handle a flooded warehouse because he had already started drinking at a party. I found the hospital schedule from the year my mother had surgery. I had worked mornings, visited her every afternoon, and answered customer calls from the parking garage. By sunrise, I had created a folder labeled Contributions. It contained contracts I had negotiated, process manuals I had written, customer accounts I had rescued, and messages showing how often decisions had been handed to me after someone else failed. Around 10, Martin called. I heard about Saturday, he said. I found the ownership agreement. There was a pause. I'm sorry, you knew? I knew they were planning to transfer control. I did not know they had finalized it. I leaned back in my chair. Did you ever tell Dad this was a bad idea? Yes. His answer came immediately. What did he say? Martin sighed. He said Ryan needed the company more than you did. I closed my eyes. Anything else? He said you were too loyal to walk away. The sentence stripped away the last excuse I had been protecting. My parents had not underestimated my contribution. They had calculated my loyalty. By the time I returned to the office the next morning, I was no longer asking whether they had treated me unfairly. I was asking how much of it I could prove. I spent the next 2 days organizing the evidence in my contributions folder. I was not preparing a lawsuit, at least not yet. I wanted facts strong enough that my family could not reduce the conversation to hurt feelings or jealousy. By Wednesday morning, I had printed a proposed employment agreement. It included a market rate salary, health benefits, defined authority over operations, and repayment terms for the $18,000 I had lent the company. I placed it on my father's desk. What's this? He asked. My conditions for continuing to work here. Ryan was standing near the window. My mother sat across from my father, twisting a tissue between her fingers. My father read the first page. $112,000? That is below the average salary for someone managing operations at a company this size. You expect us to pay you that after everything we've provided? I expect the business to pay for the work it requires. Ryan gave a short laugh. You're seriously doing this now? Yes. Right when I'm trying to take over. I looked at him. You already took over. The agreement is signed. His face reddened. You went through Dad's private documents. It was lying on his office floor. That doesn't make it yours to read. It determined my future. My father raised one hand. Enough. He fled to the section describing my authority. You want final approval over suppliers, inventory, and spending above $25,000. I already manage those things. But Ryan is president. Then he can decide whether he wants a qualified operations director or someone who quietly fixes his mistakes. Ryan stepped away from the window. You think I can't run this company? I think you have never had to. My mother whispered my name in warning. For a moment, I regretted the sharpness of my words. Ryan looked less angry than embarrassed. But embarrassment was not the same as accountability. My father closed the agreement. "We will not sign this. Then I will stop working without one." His eyebrows lifted. "What does that mean?" "It means I will complete my current obligations through Friday. After that, I will not approve payments, negotiate contracts, manage employees, or answer emergency calls unless we have a written agreement." My mother stared at me. "You would abandon us?" "I am giving you notice. We are your family." "I know." The sadness in my voice made the room quieter. My father pushed the contract back across the desk. "You are trying to force our hand because you are angry about the inheritance." "I am setting terms because the inheritance showed me that promises are not protection." Ryan picked up the agreement and scanned it. "What happens if we refuse?" "Then you run the company you were given." He dropped the pages onto the desk. "You want us to fail so you can say you were right." I shook my head. "I want to stop being responsible for decisions I'm not allowed to make." My mother began to cry. For years, that sound had been enough to make me soften, apologize, and solve whatever problem was in front of us. This time, I stayed seated. My father looked from the contract to me. "You'll change your mind." Maybe he believed that. Maybe I still feared he was right. But when I left his office, I marked Friday on my calendar. For the first time in 12 years, the company had a deadline I did not intend to rescue it from. Friday arrived with no signed contract. At 9 that morning, my father walked past my office without speaking. Ryan sent me 3 emails marked urgent, each asking me to approve purchases he had already promised to suppliers. I answered only once. "My final day under the current arrangement ends at 5. Please make any necessary decisions before then." At noon, my mother appeared in the doorway. "You're really doing this?" I closed the payroll file in front of me. "I told you what I needed. Your father thinks you're bluffing." "I'm not." She stepped inside and lowered her voice. "Couldn't you give Ryan a few months? He's overwhelmed. He has owned the company for weeks." On paper, that paper was important enough to hide from me. She flinched. "I know we handled it badly." "You did more than handle it badly." She looked toward the hallway. "What will people think if you leave now?" That question hurt less than it once would have. "They'll probably think I found another job. You know what I mean." "Yes," I said. "I do." She was worried about appearances, not whether I could pay rent or rebuild my life. At 3, I gathered the management team in the conference room. I explained that Ryan would handle operational approvals beginning Monday. I gave each department head a printed guide containing vendor contacts, payment schedules, delivery procedures, and emergency protocols. No one spoke until Martin asked, "Are you taking leave?" "I'm resigning." The room went still. Janice, our warehouse manager, frowned. "Effective when?" "Today." Ryan entered halfway through the meeting. "What is this?" he demanded. "A transition briefing. You can't announce something like this without talking to me. I spoke to you all week." He looked at the employees. "Everyone, go back to work." Nobody moved immediately. That seemed to disturb him more than my resignation. After they left, he shut the door. "You're humiliating me. I'm giving you the information you need. You're making it look like the company depends on you. I'm making sure it doesn't collapse because I left." His jaw tightened. "You always have to be the hero." "No, Ryan. I have always had to be the backup." At 4:45, I packed my personal belongings into one cardboard box. A coffee mug, 2 framed photographs, a sweater, and the red ribbon from the company's first opening ceremony. My father appeared as I removed the final folder from my desk. "You are making a terrible mistake," he said. "Maybe. You have nowhere better to go." The certainty in his voice told me he still believed fear would keep me there. I held out my office keys. He did not take them. "Your mother won't forgive you if this business suffers." I placed the keys on the desk between us. "I'm not responsible for protecting everyone from the decisions they made." Then I removed my personal guarantee from future supplier orders, emailed copies of every procedure manual to Ryan, and carried my box through the lobby. Outside, I sat in my car and cried for less than a minute. Then I started the engine. For the first time in 12 years, I drove away without knowing where I would work on Monday, and I did not turn back. Monday morning felt wrong without an alarm set for 6. I woke at 7:20, reached automatically for my phone, and expected to see missed calls from the warehouse. There were 11, 3 from Ryan, 2 from my father, 6 messages from employees asking who could approve delayed shipments. I stared at the screen until it went dark. Then I made coffee and opened my laptop at the small kitchen table in my apartment. For the first time in 12 years, I had no company email address, no office, and no title. What I did have was a list. On Friday night, after I stopped crying, I had written down every skill I had treated as ordinary because my family depended on it. Vendor negotiation, inventory planning, cost reduction, workflow design, contract review, staff training, and crisis management. Those skills had value outside Bennett Home Furnishings. I just had to prove it. I updated my RSUM and contacted 3 former suppliers who had once told me I should become a consultant. By noon, one of them had referred me to a small home goods retailer struggling with late deliveries and rising storage costs. The owner, a woman named Evelyn Moore, met me at a cafe the next day. "I can't afford a large consulting firm," she said. "I'm not a large consulting firm," she smiled. "That may be why I called." I reviewed her invoices, shipping schedules, and warehouse reports within for days. I found that 2 vendors were sending partial orders because nobody had consolidated purchase dates. Evelyn was paying extra freight charges almost every week. "You think this can be fixed?" she asked. "Yes, but you'll need to change how approvals work." "How much will you charge?" The question made me uncomfortable at Bennett. I had spent years avoiding conversations about my own compensation. I named a number lower than I had planned. Evelyn did not negotiate. "Send me an agreement," she said. That first payment covered 1 month of rent. It was not much compared with what I had helped my family earn. But when the deposit appeared in my account, I stared at it for several seconds. Someone had paid me because they believed my work was worth money. That evening, my mother called. "Ryan needs the password for the freight portal. It's in the procedure guide. He says it isn't working. Then he should contact technical support." "Claire, it would take you 2 minutes." I closed my laptop. "That is still work." She was silent. "You're really going to charge your own family for answering a question?" "I'm not charging you. I'm telling you I no longer work there." The next morning, one of Bennett's longtime customers emailed my personal account. "Ryan has not responded to us in 6 days. Are you available to help with an inventory project separately?" I read the message twice. Then another appeared from a different client. By the end of the week, 4 people connected to the industry had contacted me. I had not taken company files or approached anyone. They had come looking for the person who had always answered. For the first time, I began to wonder whether leaving Bennett Home Furnishings had destroyed my future or finally revealed it. Evelyn's project led to 2 more within a month. I was working from a borrowed desk inside her warehouse 3 days a week and meeting other clients from my apartment the rest of the time. I registered a small consulting business under the name Bennett Operations Group. For almost an hour, I hesitated over the name. Part of me wanted to remove Bennett completely. Another part decided it belonged to me too. The largest opportunity came from Westbridge Interiors, a regional furniture company with 7 stores. Their distribution costs had increased by nearly 20%, and their operations director had resigned without documenting half of his processes. I spent 3 weeks reviewing shipment records, delivery routes, staffing schedules, and supplier contracts. The problem was not one dramatic mistake. It was dozens of small ones nobody had taken responsibility for. I redesigned their ordering calendar, consolidated deliveries, and renegotiated 2 freight agreements. At the end of the first month, their chief financial officer called me. "You saved us almost $60,000, he said. I looked around my apartment to make sure I had heard correctly. "That is only the first estimate," I replied. "The annual savings should be higher. We want to extend your contract." After the call ended, I sat at my kitchen table with my hands wrapped around a cold cup of coffee. For years, my father had called me dependable as though it were a personality trait. Westbridge called it expertise. The difference changed something in me. 2 days later, Ryan called from an unfamiliar number. "Are you stealing our customers?" I leaned back in my chair. "Hello to you too, Halpern Design cancelled their order and hired you. They contacted me about a separate inventory project. They were our client. They still are. As far as I know, you used information from the company. No, I used my experience. That experience belongs to Bennett Home Furnishings. I almost laughed. You mean the experience you said anyone could replace? His breathing became louder. You're trying to embarrass me. I have not spoken publicly about the company. You don't have to. People know you left. They also know whether their calls are being returned. He went quiet. That silence told me more than an argument would have. Later that afternoon, my mother came to my apartment without warning. She stood in the hallway holding a foil-covered casserole. I thought you might not be eating properly, she said. I let her inside. She placed the dish on the counter, then noticed the folders, client invoices, and whiteboard beside my table. So this is serious, she said. Yes. Ryan says you're damaging the family's reputation by letting people believe something happened. Something did happen. She lowered her voice. Could you tell the clients you left because you wanted a new challenge? It would calm everyone down. I looked at her. You want me to lie so Ryan looks competent? I want to protect the family. For years, I had done exactly that. I had corrected mistakes quietly, softened explanations, and accepted blame to keep other people comfortable. This time, I shook my head. No. My mother stared at me as though she barely recognized me. After she left, I received a message from Martin. Can we meet privately? There are things happening at the company you need to know. Martin chose a diner 20 minutes from the office. He was already seated in a booth near the back when I arrived, with a manila folder beside his coffee. You look nervous, I said. I am. He waited until the server walked away before sliding the folder toward me. These are summaries, not original records. I cannot give you confidential company documents. I kept my hands in my lap. Then why bring them? Because your family is telling people the company is stable. It isn't. The first page showed overdue supplier balances. The second listed short-term loans I had never seen. Ryan had borrowed against inventory to finance a new showroom in another county. He had also ordered expensive imported furniture without confirmed buyers. How much debt? I asked. More than $800,000. Including existing obligations. I stared at the number. That expansion was supposed to happen next year. Ryan moved it forward, with Dad's approval. Eventually, Martin turned another page. Several payments had been made to a residential contractor. I recognized Ryan's address beside them. What is this? He said part of his home would be used to entertain clients. That house is 40 minutes from the office. I questioned it. And your father approved the expenses after Ryan promised they would be reimbursed. Were they? Martin shook his head. My stomach tightened. But the feeling was not satisfaction. It was fear. How bad is it? If two major accounts delay payment, payroll could become a problem within weeks. I closed the folder. They need professional restructuring. They need you. No, they need to stop protecting Ryan. Martin looked tired. I agree. But your parents have started using retirement funds to cover shortages. That landed harder than the debt. They told me everything was fine. They are ashamed. When I returned home, my father was waiting beside my apartment door. You met Martin, he said. I unlocked the door but did not invite him inside. He asked for advice. He had no right to discuss company finances with you. He did not give me records. My father's face hardened. You are trying to damage us. I am building my own business. With our clients. With people who contacted me. He stepped closer. If you continue interfering, we may have to involve an attorney. For 1 second, I felt 12 years old again. Then I remembered the contracts I had signed, the emails I had saved, and the boundaries I had carefully respected. Do what you think you need to do. His expression changed. He had expected fear. I don't want this to become ugly, he said. It became ugly when you gave Ryan control and expected me to absorb the risk. He left without answering. The following week, Westbridge delayed my contract renewal after receiving a letter accusing me of misusing confidential information. I sat in my car outside their office, reading the message twice. My family had not only refused to value my work. Now they were willing to destroy it. And for the first time since leaving, I wondered whether standing up for myself had cost me more than I could afford. Westbridge did not cancel my contract. Their attorney reviewed the accusation, compared it with my project records, and asked Bennett Home Furnishings to identify the confidential information I had supposedly used. My father's attorney could not provide any. I had kept every email, every signed agreement, and every note showing that clients had contacted me first. I had also refused projects that overlapped directly with active Bennett contracts. 2 weeks later, Westbridge renewed my agreement. Their chief financial officer called me personally. "We're satisfied you acted appropriately," he said, frankly. "The letter raised more questions about your former employer than it did about you." I thanked him, ended the call, and sat quietly at my desk. Relief came first, then sadness. My family had tried to frighten me back into silence, and all they had accomplished was proving I no longer needed their approval to survive. Martin resigned from Bennett Home Furnishings 3 days later. He sent me one final message: "The bank has frozen additional credit. Halpern cancelled its annual contract. Payroll is due Friday." I read it while standing in Evelyn's warehouse, surrounded by workers labeling outgoing orders. For a moment, I saw Bennett's warehouse instead. Janice checking delivery sheets, the old coffee machine near the loading dock, the red ribbon from our first store opening, now folded inside my desk drawer. I did not want the company to fail. I simply could not keep saving it from people who refused to change. That evening, someone knocked on my apartment door. My mother stood outside, but she was not alone. My father was beside her. Ryan remained near the elevator, his hands buried in his coat pockets. None of them looked angry. That frightened me more than anger would have. "Can we come in?" my mother asked. I stepped aside. They sat around the same kitchen table where I had signed my first consulting agreement. My father stared at the client folders stacked beside the wall. "You've done well," he said. It was the first time he had acknowledged my success. I waited. My mother began to speak, stopped, then looked at Ryan. He kept his eyes on the floor. My father cleared his throat. "The company is experiencing a temporary cash flow problem." "How temporary?" He did not answer. Ryan finally looked at me. "The bank won't extend the credit line, and the showroom? We may have to close it." My mother reached across the table, but this time she stopped before touching my hand. "If we miss payroll," she said, "people will leave." "They may leave anyway," I replied. Her eyes filled. "We could lose everything." I looked at my father. "Is that why you're here?" His shoulders seemed smaller than I remembered. "We need someone who understands the business." Martin understood it. He resigned, because nobody listened to him. Ryan stood abruptly. "Are you going to help us or keep punishing us?" My father turned toward him. "Sit down." Ryan froze. It was the first time I had ever heard my father correct him in front of me. Slowly, my brother returned to his chair. My mother whispered, "Claire, please come back." I looked at the 3 people who had once believed I was too loyal to leave. 6 months earlier, they had given Ryan the company because they thought he needed it more. Now they wanted me to save what he had broken. The question was no longer whether I could. It was what they were finally willing to give up. My father was the first to answer. "What do you want?" The question was so direct that, for a moment, I did not recognize him. I opened the folder beside my chair. I reviewed the public filings, the information Martin was legally able to discuss, and what you told me tonight. If I return, it will not be as Ryan's assistant. Ryan shifted in his seat. "No one said you would be. You gave him 100% ownership." My father looked down. I placed a printed proposal on the table. I would require full authority over operations and all spending above $10,000. Ryan would be removed from financial control immediately. Ryan pushed back his chair. "Absolutely not," I continued. "The company would undergo an independent valuation. I would receive a market salary, repayment of the $18,000 I contributed, and an ownership stake large enough to match the risk I would be taking." My mother scanned the first page. "How large?" 51%. Ryan laughed once, but there was no humor in it. "You want to steal the company. I want the authority to save it. It belongs to me, and that is why it is failing." He stood. You've been waiting for this. No. I spent 12 years trying to prevent it. My father held up a hand. Sit down, Ryan. This time, Ryan did not. He paced toward the window. You think you can walk back in, take everything, and make me look incompetent? I do not need to make you look incompetent. The bank records already do that. My mother closed her eyes. Claire, could we find a compromise? This is the compromise. You're asking us to take the company away from your brother. I'm asking you to stop protecting him from the consequences of owning it. Ryan turned toward our parents. You're not actually considering this. My father stared at the proposal for a long time. What happens if we say no? He asked. I do not return. My mother's face crumpled. Then the business may close. I know. The words hurt to say. But I did not take them back. My father began reading the second page. It required outside financial oversight, sale of the failed showroom, and written restrictions preventing company funds from covering personal expenses. Ryan reached across the table and pulled the proposal away. You don't get to dictate my life. No, I said. Only whether I attach my life to your decisions again. He tore the first page in half. My mother gasped. My father rose slowly. Enough. Ryan looked at him. You gave me the company. I gave you responsibility, my father said. You treated it like a reward. For one brief second, I thought something had changed. Then my mother spoke. Ryan made mistakes, but removing him completely would destroy him. There it was again. His pain mattered more than the damage he caused. I gathered the remaining pages. You still want me to carry the risk while he keeps the protection? That isn't fair, she whispered. It is exactly what you're asking. My father looked toward the torn proposal on the floor. We need time. The company does not have time. I stood and carried the folder to the door. My mother followed me into the hallway. Claire, please. This business is your father's whole life. I looked back at Ryan, who was still standing beside my kitchen table as though ownership alone should command obedience. It was part of my life too. Then I opened the door. I will not return under the same rules that drove me away. After they left, I picked up the torn page and placed it in the trash. For the first time, saving the company was no longer the hardest choice. The hardest choice was accepting that my parents might rather lose it than finally choose me. 3 weeks later, my father called. We accepted an offer, he said, for the company. For most of it, an investment group would purchase the main stores, inventory, brand name, and remaining contracts. The sale would cover the bank debt and protect part of my parents' retirement savings. But there would be little left afterward. Ryan had fought the decision until the bank gave them a final deadline. What happens to the warehouse division? I asked. It isn't included. The buyer considers it too small. That division handled custom orders for several local designers. It was profitable because I had built its supplier network myself. I'll purchase it, I said. My father was silent. Through my company, I continued, at an independently assessed price, no family discount. And I won't assume Ryan's personal expenses or unrelated debt. You would keep the employees? The ones the division can support. Janice was the first person I called. Then I contacted 6 warehouse employees and offered each of them a written contract, benefits, and clear responsibilities. Nobody would be asked to work for promises. The sale closed 2 months later. My parents moved into a smaller home. Ryan sold his renovated house to repay part of what he had taken from the company. He found a sales position with another retailer, where he reported to a manager who did not confuse excuses with potential. We did not become a close family again. My mother called every Sunday, but I answered only when I had the emotional space. My father apologized once, quietly and without asking me to forgive him. I told him I appreciated the apology, but trust would require more than regret. That was the boundary he found hardest to accept. One evening, after the last employee left, I stood alone in my new office above the warehouse. The room was small, the walls needed paint, and the heater made a clicking noise every few minutes. On my desk sat the photograph from my parents' first store opening. Beside it, I placed my grandmother's jewelry box. For years, I believed love meant making myself useful enough that nobody could abandon me. I mistook being needed for being valued, and I treated every family emergency as proof that I had to stay. Leaving did not make the pain disappear. There were still mornings when I missed the old showroom, my mother's coffee, and even the sound of my father calling for me from across the office. Grief did not vanish simply because I made the right decision. But I no longer measured my worth by how much suffering I could prevent for other people. My parents gave the company to Ryan because they believed he needed protection and I would always recover. In the end, they were right about only one thing. I did recover. Not because I was stronger than everyone else, but because I finally stopped using my strength to protect people from the consequences of hurting me. I did not save the family business they had chosen to give away. I saved the part of myself they had treated as endlessly available. Thank you for spending tonight with Deed Talks, wherever you are listening. I hope you remember that loyalty should never require you to disappear. Rest well, protect what is yours, and join me again for the next story.